together. And I was like, well, I don't play any instrument or anything. He was like, well, why don't you just be the singer? And I was like, no, I'm not going to be the singer. And I said, I definitely am not going to be the singer. And so he just said, like, well, you can be the guitar player, I'll be the singer, and we'll make a band, and I'll teach you. I have an extra guitar hanging around, and I'll teach you how to play. And so I was like, ooh, okay.
It was really interesting because Kid really couldn't play guitar, and Jeffrey really couldn't play guitar. And Don Snowden was an okay bass player. He was heavily into the meters and things like that. So, and I had Brad Dunning. I don't know what he listened to, but they kind of had this weird, swampy, different sound.
I think we actually pretty much, played out right away.
I was the booking agent for the Blasters at that time. We were just a local band, and so I'd call all the clubs, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, there was a club called the Hong Kong Cafe in Chinatown, and the Blasters got a month of Saturdays, so we could book whoever we wanted to be our opening acts. And then I get a phone call from Jeffrey Lee Pierce saying, yeah, he screwed up, man. That gig, your Saturday night gig, that's ours. That's our gig. And I was like, no, it isn't. It's blah, blah, blah. We went back and forth, and then I realized he was trying to scam me into getting a gig. And I kind of respected that. I thought that was kind of funny. And so I gave him the gig.
And I can remember someone from the audience saying, maybe if we're quiet, they'll go away. That was the first time I ever saw the Gun Club.
I remember we played some really terrifying music. Horribly awful.
They did a couple of gigs with Snowden, and the other guys, he taught them how to play. He taught Kid Conga how to play guitar.
He gave me like a Bo Diddley record, a guitar, a slide, and he said like, oh, this is how blues players play in an open E tuning.
It was really interesting because it was all new to them. And so when Kid Conga was playing slide guitar, he wasn't trying to sound like either Dwayne Allman or Elmore James. He wouldn't know where to go to do that.
Actually, Jeffrey made a tape for all of us. This tape kind of was the genesis of what was to become the Gun Club, and it was a lot of like murder ballads and just like things really kind of some normal ballads, like like Marty Robbins, gunfighter ballads.
It was moody, and it was here was Jeffrey who couldn't sing like Tommy Johnson or Charlie Patton, or trying to sing that way and trying to carry off this sort of myth of him being one of those kind of guys. And it kind of, like I said, it worked.
But I don't think more than 5 people ever came to see one of our shows. So I think that kind of lineup eventually dispersed. And we decided we wanted to keep on playing.
Rob Ritter and I played together in the Bags. They wore bags on their heads. It started out as a joke, as a lot of punk bands did. And I mean, it's a literal joke. But of course, a joke, you sort of like doing it, and you really don't want to give it up, even after the laughs are gone. So you get kind of serious, and it becomes a band. But the Bags ran their course, through punk rock, L.A., but when that was over, Rob and I were kind of, he was the bass player, I was the drummer, so we were just sort of kind of a unit looking for something to do.
I think Terry and Rob had seen us and had really taken to the attitude of the band, and for whatever reasons.
It was sloppy, it was not good, but it was very intriguing. And that was enough.
That really changed things really, really a lot, because they could play really well, and they were a rhythm section that was ready-made. The Gun Club at this time, we were playing to 15 people a show. There was no record. There was no anything. So one day I just got a call from Ivy of the Cramps asking me if you want to, would you be interested to be in our band? And I was like, oh, I don't know, I don't know how to play. Of course, I called Jeffrey immediately. I was like, what do I do? The Cramps asked me to play, and he's like, are you crazy? You should do it. I'd do it in a minute. the only question she said was like, well, what are you willing to sacrifice? And I was like, well, what, like, going to college or moving or my band or what? She's like, oh no, I mean, like, would you be willing to sacrifice a finger or something? I said, I'll get back to you on that. And so that was that, and Jeffrey's blessing, off I went.
And so we needed a guitar player, and then that's how we found Ward.
I was a huge Cramps fan, and I saw Ivy at the Whiskey, and I said, "You're my favorite band, etc., etc. Can I be in your band?" She said, "Well, you got to write a letter to this lady and send a picture." And so I did that, and took a week off of work because I just knew they were going to call me, and of course that didn't happen. And they picked Kid, and I was a little crestfallen. And maybe later that week, I saw Jeff at a Billy Zoom concert, and I just went up to him and said, "Are you still looking for a guitar player?" And I didn't say, "I want to be in your band. I like your band," anything to that, effect. And the next day, I was in the Gun Club.
Ward brought a lot of interesting things to the band.
I embellished some things that Kid was doing. I was, better guitar player than he was, but the fact that he couldn't play really it was just a great mishmash. The open E tuning was an idea that Jeff had to get Kid in his band. Instead of playing an E chord, you just tune the guitar to an E chord, and then he could just shout out numbers to him, like open, 3, 5, 7. I guess Kid had numbers on the side of his guitar, and then Jeff could just show him how to play the songs, but they couldn't do minor chords. It was this like kind of weird caveman punk rock.
The whole point to punk rock was that we could reclaim rock and roll. In the middle and late 70s, rock and roll was a corpulent blob of gristle that was dead, that was busy, bent over, sucking its own cock, and every time it would come, it would lay back down and then bend back over again and start sucking its own cock again. And there was no room in there for anything else other than its own penis that it feeds on, and the money and the hair and the quaaludes and all the stuff, all the disgusting mess that rock and roll had become. And then you have disco come along out of left field, which, while rock and roll is sucking its own dick, disco crawls up from behind it and tries to fuck it in the ass at the same time. So you have a mess here.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. Whatever you just said, man, my brain's pudding.
Tell me a little bit about the making of Fire to Love.
I don't know. We weren't together, but a few months before we started thinking about putting a record out.
Tito LaRiva, who was in the Plug, said, "Hey, I'll give you some money to make a demo, and then I'm going to put out these EPs that'll be just one side of a 33 1/3 LP. This is my gimmick."
To say it was a tight budget is really not really describing it.
We went in at, I don't know what time, really late, and recorded about 5 or 6 songs.
Basically, you just go in, you turn the machine on, you play your songs, and then you walk out the door as quickly as you can.
Then he was having trouble getting the label together, and in that interim, Jeffrey took that tape and went over to Slash, where he used to work, and would just play it on a cassette. And I guess through doing that, Bob Biggs heard it and said, "What's this?" And Chris D., who is the singer in the Flesh Eaters and also worked at Slash, totally championed the band and convinced Bob Biggs to put this, measly little record out on Ruby, which was a subsidiary of Slash.
Chris D. came in and, working with Jeff, they created the final product. And so even though half the songs are sound a little bit different than the other half, I mean, to me, it's still a pretty cohesive whole.
Fire of Love was definitely a seminal record. No record sounded like Fire of Love before. It certainly had its influences and all of Jeff's blues records, and the Cramps and X kind of getting the wheels in motion that you could combine punk with another genre and it could be really interesting. But Fire of Love was 11 songs that are just perfect.
When I first heard Fire of Love, I was seriously blown away because you could hear lyrics and hear intonations that were not at all audible on stage.
And you could finally hear what Jeffrey was singing about, and he's, as good a lyricist as was writing from that period since.
He adopted this great persona of this refugee Civil War soldier, almost like everyone was talking about Vietnam in the late 60s. Jeffrey was talking about Civil War in the early 80s. And so you had Jeffrey Lee Pierce as a 22-year-old kid from the Valley, no nexus to anything involved at that time. And he just wrote these great songs about, riding on a black train. This kid didn't ride on a black train.
He tied in what we picked up in the theatrical, what he picked up in his writings like Faulkner, Beckett, Burroughs, and Pinter, and created this kind of character, this alter ego that he could slide into.
And then boom, that record got made, and it came out, and immediately people got it.
For us to get the word out, of course, we had to tour like every other band has to. But really, it was totally do-it-yourself. I mean, the first Gun Club tour, we went to Rocket and Rent a Car.
It actually said "Rent a Rocket" on the side of the van.
This beat-up van.
The shittiest van that has ever been made.
There's nothing in it. And so we stuffed ourselves, our equipment, and a few good luck charms, and, hit the road.
We went out and worked the record.
Yeah, we
played the South and the Midwest, and in a perfect time of year, February, because the weather is so mild in the United States, in the Midwest and the North.
The thing that just took us completely by surprise was the reaction the record got almost immediately everywhere east of the Mississippi.
And then when he went to New York and he got on the cover of New York Rocker, that was a big deal. New York Rocker was... in those days was the Rolling Stone for the alternative music set.
That was a shocker, and not because it was a Gun Club. Just seeing Jeffrey's face so large on the cover of a magazine was kind of shocking.
The New York Times, Robert Palmer was their rock critic, I think, at the time, and he wrote a review of Dylan's new record and the Gun Club Fire of Love record. And the New York Times does not do new bands, and he basically said, in with the new, out with the old. That is awfully heady stuff from some band that no one gave two shits about in L.A. So sudden, instant credibility in New York, in Boston.
Our first show we did in Boston, I mean, it was about the most amazing live experience I've ever had. They were just packed into this club. The energy was just so thick you could cut it with a knife.
It just sort of caught on, like in hot spots that were later hot spots, like Minneapolis and Austin, Texas, college towns.
Shortly thereafter, we went to London, and the first show at the venue, which held 1,200 people, was sold out. And, the reviews were great.
The French ate it up, and all of Europe, and it's a great record,
I mean, we all felt great. If it made you feel great, to be that well liked. But I think that maybe that's when it started, where, this adoration... in Jeff's mind, kind of became separated from the band as a whole. It wasn't Gun Club adoration; it was adoration for me.
Remember, the band went on stage, and it was packed house, about 1,000 people, and got a nice ovation. We started playing some song, and then Jeff walked on later, and it was like the Grinch's heart or whatever. I saw his head just go boom, 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 boom,
and he would never really let on that this kind of thing was going on inside of him. He always tried to kind of play everything down. But in fact, yes, this just boosted his ego like nothing else.
Man, I didn't ask for any of this shit.
There were a lot of friends of the bands, and after we would do shows, some of these temporary friends would show up, and there always seemed to be friends there waiting for Jeffrey. And so I just felt like I knew Jeffrey had a girlfriend problem, because I never really saw him with a girl.
So much of what he talked about in the songs was kind of like the dark side of romance, the dark side of relationships, the dark side. I mean, not that it was a kind of confessional writing, because it was more stories, but that's so bizarre that I never even thought of him as like a sexual being, even though he totally was, but he was never hooked up with anybody.
Girls would be nice to him because his star was rising, but I don't ever remember him hooking up with any girls except for what's her name, Tex.
She was waitressing at the lingerie, and I think that's where they met, and he became infatuated with her, obsessed.
Jeffrey Lee and Tex was like a Pygmalion kind of thing, where he was molding her in his image.
Jeff, what are you doing here?
He had enough of a vision that he basically formed Tex and the Horseheads.
Jeffrey formed Tex and the Horseheads as a side project for Texicala Jones, and Jeffrey played a few shows with Kathy DeGrand, and then he had to leave to go to Europe, and enlisted me to play the guitar.
That was great. They did cover songs.
They were very much in his style, and I'm not sure if he told them they were, that they were his or not.
I remember I used to DJ at Club Lingerie, and one day I'm playing "Slip Away," the Clarence Carter record.
And I don't think Tex knew it was a cover until maybe a few years later. We, she found out, I think, through Fast Freddy.
She comes running up to me and goes, "Where did you get this? They're doing my song." I go, "This is from 1967, Tex."
It was funny because later on, I realized Jeffrey had this kind of penchant for women that looked exactly like Tex.
She had a wild look, hair, clothes, everything, and it was just leathered and laced and sleazy, and it was a cool look, actually. And Jeff loved it, and I think he just felt this connection with her.
I like that song on the record, where the drums go boom, 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 and then you have these saxophones and the guitars. Wow, wow.
And I remember they opened for the Gun Club in New York. I mean, he flew her to New York and just force-fed her to the Gun Club audience, and he played guitar, and someone told me that when the Gun Club was playing, like the security guard was banging her, and
Tex also was supposed to be the girlfriend of the guitar player in Parliament Funkadelic. I don't know.
We always used to speculate if they were like sleeping with each other, but I don't know if they were or not.
Tex and Jimmy Joe had sparks there for a few minutes, so that caused friction with Jeffrey, who was a very, very jealous young man.
It just had to be torturous to be, the guy who's the star of the band and just cannot seem to get anything going.
Shut up.
So then, as the band got, that critical acclaim was there, and then fans started to follow in behind it. It was from the East Coast. We had offers, from booking agents and people in New York. Basically, and of course, Jeff had always had some kind of relationship, I guess, with Blondie, the band, on some level. And then when they got their Vanity label, we were one of the bands that they had considered, because we'd already kind of made a name for ourselves by that time anyway. And so really the band had shifted from LA to a New York band.
He started hanging out with some other people and trying to score drugs. I mean, it's weird. Like, I drank more than he did, but I didn't act like a complete idiot. It had a different effect on him. He's kind of mad anyway, and it just made him even more, crazed.
I remember one time at the Ninth Circle, this bar we used to all go to in New York. That was when Jeff was starting to really get a lot into heroin.
Jeffrey wanted to be a drug addict and an alcoholic, and it's a terrible thing to want to aspire to be. But apparently he got his wish, because that happened for him.
All right, this song's about people who are worried about sex. into drugs.
So we recorded Miami in New York at a very small studio that I never liked. I never ever liked the sound of that record, and I don't know anyone who does. It's too bad. I thought some of Gun Club's really good songs were on that record.
Miami was an improvement over Fire of Love for a couple reasons. I think Jeffrey's lyric writing had progressed in that year or so. Some of those songs were definitely a carryover from the first record. I know Bad Indian and the title track from the first one. There are also a lot of harmonies on that record that Fire of Love never dreamed of.
But at that time, the band was really starting to split apart. It was going to Jeff's head. There he is. Chris Stein's next to him. He's producing a record. And somebody is telling him, you don't need your band. All you need is you.
I think we should have stayed with Slash, and we should have had somebody different produce the second record. That was a huge career mistake.
I think had he been with less understanding guys, he might have been minus a tooth or two after telling you to your face that he doesn't need you. He can put anybody in the band and still do the same thing.
It was a culmination of that first lineup. And at that time, Rob isn't featured on the cover, I know, because he quit before it came out.
And that's really when the band ended. As soon as Rob quit the band, I was like, well, shit. I guess what can I get out of this? You know, are we going to Europe again? I'd like to do that. That's a terrible attitude to have. You know, the writing is on the wall. I mean, Rob was really half the reason I was in the band, and the other half was Terry.
Ward left, and I'm sure he thought, it sucked that I stayed in the band, and because he and Jeff just did not get along.
So we finished up this U.S. tour, which was just, every day was just inches from belting him. And the last week, there were maybe like 3 or 4 shows left, and the roadie came in my room and said, Jeffrey's packing his bag. I just heard him make a reservation at the airport for a plane ticket. He's leaving. He's a cowardly guy, too, He wasn't going to tell anybody. He was just going to skip out. And I went into his room and I said, look, motherfucker, you're finishing this tour. Unpack your bags. We're finishing this tour. You're not leaving us high and dry, okay? And we finished the tour, and that was the last I ever talked to him. I got home, and someone said, hey, I saw Gun Club has a new record out, and I wasn't on it, so I assumed I wasn't in the band anymore. But, I was... It was a get fired, quit, thing all the way around. He hated me and I hated him.
He and Jeff just did not get along at all. They could not see eye to eye on anything at that point.
That was the end of the Gun Club for me. And I cried a million tears.
I introduced the idea of bringing in Patricia as a bass player to the band after Rob left and went to 45 Grave.
Inadvertently, Alice Bag's band became a definite, AAA team for the Gun Club. It's really funny how that worked out.
It's strange how things work because, again, even for me, I was starting to think, well, there's probably going to be another band I'm going to have to be in because... this one is I don't trust it, and